Introducing your hosts from Collingwood, Ontario, Canada, Jack Edwards, and his partner from Dallas, Texas, by way of Port Arthur, Texas, Big George. Together, they are the North-South Connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are the North-South Connection, and we are here. It is 5 Count, episode number 20. 20 episodes. People are still watching us. And we have such a special episode. This is huge for me. But first of all, I'm Jack Edwards, of course, and my man, Big George. He's big in Canada. Big everywhere, really.
I'm a celebrity up there. They don't even know it yet. But when I come, just roll out the red carpet, baby.
Yeah, don't worry, we will. But ladies and gentlemen, we have a very, very special guest. I've known this man for more than 20 years. He's been a mentor. He's been a friend. And I've worked alongside him. I like to say him as I can't pronounce it right, but his consigliere. If you've ever seen Analyze This, I'm Ben Sobel to his Paul Vitti. Ladies and gentlemen, he is Tornado. Tornado, thank you for joining us. I won't reveal your.
How you doing, fellas?
Good. Thanks for being here.
Hey,
We're so excited.
I came out of the cave. This is awesome. I love it.
Came out of the woods. Now, Tornado lives in Northern Ontario. A town called Sudbury, right? Which is, it's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there.
It's close.
That's actually probably Timmins, if we're being fair. But it's a town in Northern Ontario, and he's known for just like spending days in the bush, just like, practicing wrestling and ninja moves. But Mark, we're so happy. We're so happy you're here. And I mean, when did you get into wrestling? And, what wrestling was it?
Oh, man. Well, when I was a kid, it was so, when I grew up, we had like black and white TV, right? With 2 channels, the rabbit ears, and we get whatever we could get. And then there was Superstars of Wrestling. It was a George Cannon show out of Niagara Falls.
Oh.
And so that was the first wrestling that I saw on TV, and it just blew me away. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And we're talking the original Sheik, George Cannon. Oh God! And then there's the crossover to international wrestling. So you had Gino Brito was there. There's just such amazing talent, right? And then when international wrestling out of Montreal popped up, that was on Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m, baby. I'm telling you, the world stopped, and it was international wrestling time. My dad and I didn't talk to each other for years, except for Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock. We're sitting there, So, and so that was, to me, it was the ultimate, because they had a trading relationship with AWA. So you got to see Rick Martel and the Road Warriors and Von Raschke and whoever else they worked into the storylines with the Rougeaus and the Britos and the Dino Bravo and guys like that who were part of the Montreal crew. So yeah, Shorzy, of course, it's shot here in Sudbury. Are you kidding me? Of course. See, there's something better than me in Sudbury.
Barely, just barely.
But
so you watched that, you were hooked. Yeah.
Oh man, you know what? Even one of my favorite times was seeing. So that international wrestling used to tour, and they're the ones who used to come to our Sudbury arena here. And so I don't know if you know George, but there's like OHL hockey, so it's like a semi-pro kind of hockey league, and they'll do like your full bowl kind of arena, but it's only, I'd say, 5,000 seaters. So that's what this company would tour, or these 5,000 seaters, full bowl OHL arenas, Ontario Hockey League arenas. And, once a month they'd come to the Sudbury Arena and sell it out, man. Like 5,000. You could still smoke back then. The place was hazy. It was just amazing. It was fantastic.
Had that light hazy.
One light, you got it.
Yeah.
So there was a guy I think there's a guy at Calgary, Steve DeSalvo, and he'd wrestle in international wrestling as Steve Strong. Gigantic gas monkey. I think he did sometime at WCW as Minotaur a long time ago.
Really?
Something like that.
But him and Rick Martel had a fantastic feud, and I remember in the Sudbury Arena, man, with the cage up, and Rick Martel's battling this big musclehead. Oh man, fantastic! Saw the Road Warriors tear the place apart. The Long Riders, Huge fan of Bill Irwin. I love Bill Irwin. So, and then you just got to see these crazy wrestlers you never get to see. So one of my favorites, like John knows, because whenever we talk about wrestling, I'll always say, who?
Richard Charland.
You got it, baby. Richard the Boss Charland. One of the most amazing pro wrestlers I've ever seen in my entire life. I swear to God, to this day, he was like, I don't know. He just did different moves all the time. Everything was different. It was a fantastic wrestler. He could talk, got amazing heat, but just fluid in the ring. Fluid. Like a freaking ballet dancer.
And he had that big kind of belly, but he looked built, but he wasn't like washboard abs. He was like, he looked like he could beat you up.
Oh yeah, and he had a like, you could tell that he was an athlete. So here's this guy, Stubby. He's still a big dude, but then they'd announce his name. He'd do a front handspring over the top rope, right? And hit the freaking, and he'd do a front handspring in, and then he'd do these bunny hops for about 50. He did like 15 bunny hops, just bang, 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 hopping around the ring, getting heat, eh? It was just amazing. Like, just the fact he did the springboard into blew me away, but it was incredible. What an incredible time.
So,
how many years would you say you've been in the business?
28 now, perhaps, maybe 30. I'm not too sure. I'm going to say 28.
So 28 years in the business.
I think you told me you started in 96. I think that's when you started.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
So right around that time, of course, the Monday Night Wars were going on.
Mm-hmm.
Did you? So I have to ask, because of course you probably are never going to answer this ever again. Did you pick a side, and which side did you pick?
Well, earlier on, of course, growing up, right, I just got WWF. That's all we got at a certain point. But getting to what we might be talking about tonight, about the Carpenters in the business, WCW Saturday Night blew my mind. That was where you saw these
That's
matches.
where the money was.
Oh, my God.
That's where the money was.
Yeah. Like, if you could see Brad Armstrong against Dean Malenko, are you kidding me? All day long, man. And that, I still, I appreciated all the old wrestling. Of course, I'm a huge Honky Tonk Man guy. I love Honky Tonk Man.
Okay.
I love like Rick Rude that whole time, but like Honky's to me is one of the best pro wrestlers of all time. You know what I mean? You don't have to be do the hurdles to be a good pro wrestler, right?
Yeah,
He's got to draw that heat. He's got to pull that heat out, and he could do it effortlessly.
So. We'll probably get into your top five a little later, so I'm not going to even ask you that, because, of course, there's a lot of things that kind of build up to exactly what your top five is. And, your top five wrestlers will definitely be different from anybody else's list that we probably had on the show, because, of course, there's always a deep dive, always. And I know you see the notes that keep coming up at the bottom. That's Kareem. You're going to see a lot of Richard Irwin Rude tweets here from him, because him and Rick Rude are one and the same for some reason. But at the same time, I mean, there's a lot of wrestlers that you probably came across. What wrestler did you take a lot of information from, and what information can you say that you've used over the years that you would like to pass on?
Oh man, like there's nobody better than Ric Flair, and that whole Ric Flair and Terry Funk to me were the timing belts of pro wrestling, right? Where they hit a meter. Like Stevie Ray Vaughan, you hit that meter, that freaking rock and roll meter, and you can go all night long at that pace. There's a pace to it. With music, you can have a guitar player who's going to play a million notes, but some people think it's great, but it's a million notes and it sounds like gibberish, right? Mm-hmm. You can be the fastest guitar player in the world, but then you have a guy like Stevie Ray Vaughan, and it's what he doesn't play that is what makes him great. So when you take that to wrestling, it's just the people who could tell a story and just walk other people around the ring and have a great match with a young Sting, let's say, and just make him look like $1 million, and he has no idea what he's doing yet, but looks like $1 million and deserves to be there. There's no choice. There's no doubt. But Jesus, like I'm telling you, like between Terry Funk, like one of my favorite matches of all time is watching Funk and Hogan in what is that, Jack? It's the Garden. Is that what it is? You and I were talking about it because I watched it like 1 million times. It was at a Boston Garden.
There was one in the Boston Garden, yeah. Or was it the Saturday Night Main Event that they did? Or?
No. It was like a house show.
Okay.
It was
awesome. I know they worked in the Garden, Boston Garden.
Yeah. So Terry Funk, so those two guys, as far as the meter's concerned, everything else, I like humor. So I do take a little of Honky. I take, talking about Saturday Night's Main Event, him and Bret Hart, one of my favorite matches growing up on Saturday Night's Main Event, and Honky misses a fist drop and sells his hand for the rest of the night. It was amazing. It was amazing.
Okay.
And, you know, Terry Taylor's another one. Terry Taylor's a great pro wrestler. There's lots of, you know, another Saturday night standout. Bobby Eaton.
And he helped you a lot, right? Terry Taylor.
Yeah. Later on in life,
learn a lot from Terry Taylor.
Get a little bit of mentorship from Terry Taylor along the way, which is awesome. And so man, it just goes on and on. It's like a big melting pot of all that beauty, you know.
It's a lot of knowledge in this room right now.
Yeah.
I just think between you two.
What made you get in? Yeah.
Y'all are definitely 80s. Y'all are definitely 80s loving wrestling guys. Like it's just like embodied in y'all. And the thing is, I like to learn from y'all. I like to kind of pull information out of y'all because I think a lot of that gets lost in translation nowadays. Today's wrestling, me and John were talking earlier, and we had a whole, a little list of banter about it. And I told him straight, I was like, today's wrestling, and not to disrespect today's wrestling, is more like a video game. We were talking about selling finishers, and I think the big thing about, selling finishers is that nowadays you got people doing the same finisher 2 and 3 times just to get things over. Yeah. And I'm like, I kind of hate it because it kind of started as, he had Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle who would do a move 2 or 3 times, and then they would kind of make it pop. But now you have it to where people are doing their finishers like that. And I'm like, if we can go back to the old school way of doing it to where you had one finisher that sold off, that would actually be really, really good. But I think, with the way, new wrestling is, it's a lot more like a video game, like I said. Like you can hit that special 50 times if it's loaded up there. So old school wrestling is definitely different. So like, what are some things that you not necessarily compare, but what do you miss about the good old days?
Oh man, I live in the good old days. I think you can take a crowd and really spin them your way because that's what we do. The guys I talk to and I work with, I always tell them the second you walk through the curtain, you have to establish your character. Don't pretend that everybody knows who you are because they don't. And if they do, then it's time to take that character up a notch. So every time you walk through that curtain, you start from 0 and work your way up to 10. And that's how I feel. So the old school ways, I think, they're still pliable today. I just think that I think it might even on a bigger stage, that old school kind of way might transfer better to a larger audience if given the chance. I think right now you're just seeing what you're going to see on TV is just whatever's popular elsewhere, and then they just do like when ECW was hot in the 90s. WWE just did a shitty version of it, right? Yeah. So it really did. Yeah, everybody had like so it's like you had the real deal, and then you had like these knockoffs that were good for 8 o'clock Monday night consumption.
Yeah, I got you.
One of the things I miss that we were talking about, George and I is when they would get a finisher over. Like that was like when, like they did the Master Lock Challenge, even, was a great way to get that finisher and that dude over. Mm-hmm. Sergeant Slaughter used to do it with the Cobra Clutch. Like they would, really get like Jake with the DDT. Like nowadays, like they don't get a finisher over. It's kind of, everyone kind of does a version of the same finish.
Yeah.
But, I miss those days when you would really get a finisher over, like the full Nelson.
It's all about the storytelling, and you can be in front of X amount of people, and if somebody drops me with a DDT and I take it on the top of my skull and I don't kick out, they're still gonna pop,
right?
They're gonna pop because I just landed on my skull. Like there's no doubt about it. And so the way I always when I talk to guys and I work with guys, like if I'm working a guy who's only been around for a year or two, I'm like, no, we're not doing that. I'm not doing that. And then if your finish is the finish, you hit me once. I'm not kicking out. Absolutely not. You know, it's like telling Superfly Snuka you're going to kick out of the freaking,
The
you know,
Splash. Nah.
it ain't happening, man.
Nah.
And nobody wants to see it either. And I'm sure, you know, I understand. I always tell the guys too, I feel like I'm like a freaking preserved moose at the gas station, right? I don't belong anymore. And I understand. Like maybe I don't, maybe I do, but this is just how I have to do it. And if I go down in flames doing how I do it, so be it. I'm okay with that. You know, so I have a certain belief, and it hasn't been wrong yet. So it's all about entertaining people, man. And if you want to put over a gimmick, and your gimmick is whatever, and the people pop it, you believe it, they believe it, and your opponent believes it, that's all that matters. You know, because I've also seen this kind of stuff happen where people are kicking out, and people in the crowd are laughing at them.
Right.
You know,
it's a nowadays. I've been watching wrestling since probably about when you got started, maybe a little bit before, because of course I would peek in, but I wouldn't know very much in like 94, 95. 96 is when I really kind of was like, I choose WCW over WWE. And that's kind of where I got started. But of course, I eventually had to switch just like everybody else and kind of conform. So I did so. But over the years, you can watch how the style has not only changed, but is actually updated to what a lot of social media presence actually kind of brings. And I think one thing about that is I'm not blaming social media for the wrestling that we get today, because that's not the problem. I think the issue, more or less, not even the issue, but it's changed. It's changed immensely. And I think the biggest thing about the change for me is that I noticed some of the things that were done back in the 90s. And of course, you guys recognize things that were done back in the 80s, back in times where not a lot of this stuff we would actually even go on. It's almost a totally different show compared to if you took 2024 and put it in the 80s. I'm pretty sure people wouldn't really be enamored by it very much, especially from a wrestling standpoint. So it's like, you know, knowing that there's, you know, people who really kind of indulge in the old age adage of wrestling. I think the thing about you saying I'll go down with this ship is literally how people look at it. I'm kind of with you on that. Like, I'll go down with this ship as far as it being some of the best styles of wrestling that I could actually watch. Like some of that Saturday night stuff, some of that Sunday, you know, you got some Sunday night heat every now and again, who had some good matches every now and again that they would show. WCW Saturday night was
awesome.
Probably the most undersold show they ever had in life. Because if you ever watch WCW on a Saturday, like, you got every match that you wanted on a Monday, but on a Saturday. And I was thinking, like, I want more matches. Like, I knew I was really into wrestling young when I wanted more matches with different people and different styles. I wanted that. And I was like, yeah, I might like this a little bit more than what, you know, my average classmate does. Yeah. So kind of watching the older, you know, adages of wrestling, like I used to watch like the AWA, some of those matches every now and again. I would just kind of watch the show because I know for a fact that I'm not looking for anybody specific. So I'm just kind of trying to see who's going to catch my eye. And there's a lot of guys back then, like you can watch one match and then you like, damn, that was a good match. And you kind of move on to the next one. Damn, that was a good match. And you kind of keep moving along like that. So it kind of just traps you in there. So at this particular time, do you feel like there's anybody that you would consider more old school than what the time is actually showing now? Like, is there anybody who gives you that feeling?
No, not at all, man. I still say like the best. You know what I mean? Like the best guy is if Ric Flair does a guest spot, he's the best guy on the show. You know what I mean? That's I don't know what to say. I don't like Christian. I think Christian still has it and still rocks it. Still awesome.
That's a good one.
And
that's a good one. People don't really think about it like that.
Yeah, but I don't know, man. It's very tough. It just doesn't appeal to me. Like, I'm not saying, you know, of course, that's just me. But I you know, like getting back to the kickouts or all that kind of stuff. Like, it just kind of gets lazy, doesn't it? Like, you know, and there, when you get that okay. So to me, I like the Fed when it was you know, when Stone Cold was on top and The Rock was there, and you had that feeling when you watched that footage of it was almost like the people were gonna cave into the ring. You know what I mean? There's just a huge feeling and so much excitement. And now, you know, you they show the hard cam shot, you see everybody's on their phones on the front in the front, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's a different world, man. And it's and like I said, maybe I don't belong. I don't know. I'm the Iceman. I was thought out and brought in.
No.
And that's it, you know. But like if you're on your cell phone, man, if I was a heel, I'd walk up and slap it right out of your freaking hand.
Perfect
You
heel. Perfect
know
heel.
what I mean?
Yeah. Mark, talk about though, like what we do, like at we do Rock Solid. Obviously, you and I do promote Rock Solid Wrestling. Like we really have that feel, and it's not on a huge stage, but we draw good crowds for what we can and the venues we can get, and we really have. We target a lot. You know, I think we really have that. Why do you think we're able to do that? Is it just the talent we have, or is it?
Well, it's definitely the locker room. Like Rock Solid Wrestling came from, looking around a change room, being at a show, and just being like, "Holy Jesus, man, I don't belong anymore," right? And then just looking at what was going on and stuff, and then saying, "Okay, I'm going to put together a crew, but we're going to put it together, and it's going to be a locker room. It's not just going to be random indie wrestlers in and out weekly, and we're going to have a freaking roster of." And so who's the best, right? Cody Deaner, he's in TNA. He's did a bunch of stuff all over the world. Jake O'Reilly's been to Japan. He's in, his tag team partner's in, Anthony Darko. Like everybody has been somewhere. So it doesn't mean, and especially now that there's not too many places to work to make a living. It doesn't mean that because you're not making a living that you suck. Okay. It just means that for some particular reason, your name wasn't pulled. You're still amazing at what you do. So let's just provide them that platform. So it's a little bit higher up as far as working to a camera, doing TV tapings, doing stuff like that. And then if you're young and you get in with Rock Solid Wrestling, you get that experience so that when you do go somewhere and you have to work a camera and you have to work a microphone, you've done it. And you've done it in a professional setting with professionals. So, a lot of times, I think the biggest thing that I hear sometimes is that we run with the same guys, and my answer is yes, we do. That's exactly it.
I got to get.
We get other guys mixed.
Just gotta.
Well, George, we're trying to get you up next for the Collingwood show.
Yeah,
man. Our Collingwood show is our big show. Proud of that, but it's our big show, so we got to make sure we get you up here because this, man, I tell you what, it's the crowd. We have great crowds, but we have guys who are able to. Again, like we don't like a finish is a finish in Rock Solid Wrestling. You got to finish; it's a finish. One guy does the DDT. It's Cody Deaner. He does it. Once he hits, it's over. But Jake O'Reilly does the pile driver. Like people, like it's just moves are established, and we have a great group of guys. Like Mark said, it is a locker room. Like Like after the Collingwood shows, we had a great we had a birthday party for the man here because it was his birthday.
It's right on that day, right on the day.
Yeah, and that was the show that we did. Eric Young was in, who Mark has been pals with for a long time. Cody Deaner, they were all. It's a great 6-man match, great crowd. The place was packed. Made great money for Special Olympics, and but you could see it. Like for me, I'm kind of an outsider a bit because like I'm not clearly I never wrestled. I'm as athletic as a mattress, so that's not going to happen. But like I was, it was cool to see. Like they have a real camaraderie, and you see that there, and you see that in the ring, you see that in the locker room. Like so, it's a really good place to be. But Mark, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on was George and I were speaking about looking at some guys who don't really get the recognition they deserve. And you and I have a term, and it's carpenter. Yeah. So explain to me in your eyes what a carpenter is, and and then we'll get into your top 5 carpenters. But explain to me what it is.
Well, before we get to that, George, I wanted to say, going back to what we were talking about the kind of now and then. Mm-hmm. I look at some of the talent today that's in the WWE right now, and just thinking like they're not going to get any better because they're wrestling their friends, right? Like,
right.
And so to me, it's like if you took some of your top guys that are going to be good, and you say, okay, go to Japan for 6 months, right? Or do something. Just get some seasoning. Come back. Go back. And that was what I liked, I think, about the old days is, the British Bulldogs would be wrestling somebody on the Fed. They'd lose, they'd disappear, and then 6 months later, they'd come back. It's like, oh my God, the British Bulldogs are back, right?
Right.
And then they went to Japan or they went wherever. And I think that, like, when you have the money that the Fed has, then you can definitely say, hey, go work in fucking Canada for, whatever, for 4 months. We'll still pay you, but just wrestle other people. Do something different. Learn from someone who's been doing this for 30 years. And then when you come back, you're going to come back with that little bit more seasoning on you. Go to Japan, be a young boy for I'm not saying start from scratch, but hey, maybe start from scratch. Look at Rocky, man. He used to start from scratch every movie, for Christ's sake.
Exactly. He was always training like he ain't never fought before, which I was just like, motherfucker, you just beat up. But all right, we're not gonna act like that happened. But I like that aspect of it because, of course, there was a lot of people back in the day who would like. And for some of the audience that's a little bit older and not necessarily too into what we actually are doing today, when people used to go back, like there was NWO members who you wouldn't see on TV who would be in Japan just wrestling their asses off, and they come back and you see them like, oh, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, or anybody, Scott Norton, just anybody who was always going over and coming back. I think that you kind of had a little bit of, oh, look, they're back. Even if you never really liked them like that. Like, there's a lot of people who are, going back and forth and becoming better wrestlers throughout time. And you can kind of see that in their styles. Like, Scott Norton, perfect example.
But, like, you also had, the Japanese guy, Masa Chono. I remember when Masa Chono kept showing up, it was a big deal. But, George, Jim Cornette has a great line. He said, how can I miss you if you won't go away?
Go away. Exactly.
That's why the pop for Roman when they brought him back, because he was away for, a significant period of time for today's wrestling. But Mark, what about the Carpenters? Tell me what a Carpenter is.
Well, in my eyes, there's people that use the word jobber, and there's two different ways of doing this. So you can say a jobber, however, there's different aspects for the story you're trying to tell. So we've all seen, like, let's say, was it Dan Spivey dumping some guy on his head, him and Sid Vicious dumping a guy a tag, because there's some guys who don't even know how to wrestle and they're there somehow getting killed by these guys, or Scott Steiner killing somebody or whatever, right? And so those to me are jobbers. They can't even run the ropes. I don't know how they're in the ring. I don't know why they're in the ring, right? But somehow they're in there with Scott freaking or with Dan Spivey, and he's gonna freaking drop him on his skull. So there's that type of thing, but there's also, like, the Carpenter to me is the guy who takes the up and coming talent and makes them better, through road work, the TV spots, yes, but the road work was where, you could work someone every day on the road and just learn from a guy who's 40 years in the business. That guy's not going to be he's not going to be selling t-shirts, but he could definitely teach you how to work better. And that's the kind of seasoning. So I think I brought this up to you before, was my Shawn Michaels analogy, right? Because he's the best that's ever done it, right? Athletically and everything. He's the best. However, he worked that long program with Tito, and he worked a long program with Rick Martel. And that to me is like, without those two guys, spending that time with them, like, one former AWA World Heavyweight Champion, and the other guy was Intercontinental Tag Team Champion. Both are studs in the business. They both were.
And veterans. Tito's awesome.
Oh yeah,
I love Tito Santana.
But they freaking like he spent that time with them in the ring, getting that seasoning, and to me he wouldn't have been the same without that time. Given he was still in the WWE and he was still doing towns, but he was working with someone who was better. And he was working with someone who's going to give him that knowledge. That's where I think we're missing is that guy. Pedro Morales, for Christ's sakes. Pedro Morales was the first. He was the first guy to win all 3 belts, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
And he was a jobber to the stars at the end of his career, but he was giving back, and he still had something to offer to these guys. Like he's seasoning these guys who are coming up, right? That's what it's all about. And I think that's a big
still a name.
Sure.
Absolutely still a name. And I think the fact that he was around just try to give people a little bit of something. Like some people, Yeah, they got some stars who get real big and they don't never come back to kind of, make the business a little bit better. And I think that's one of the things that they kind of lost as a lost art. Like you don't really see, like you say, a lot of people working different styles, different people. Like I think that'd be something that'd be really, really good. But I think where as like a fan, from a fan's perspective, I don't want to see my favorites going that long. So at the same time, me personally, kind of like you, John. How can I miss you if you won't go away?
You won't go away.
And so I think that we kind of need a little bit of separation. Like separation anxiety is cool a little bit in the wrestling business because of course it's always going to have you fiending for whenever you get back. What have you learned? What will be better? How good will it look? Like even though Roman was only gone for like 6-7 months, when he came back, everybody was
Not even 3.
It seemed like 3. It had to be 6 months. Because his father.
No, April to August. So, I wanted to talk about Pedro though. There's a great match out there for anyone who wants to watch. Pedro versus Harley Race in the Boston Garden. Just like you want to talk about two guys who knew how to work.
Look at Mick Foley's career and how Terry Funk kind of took him under his wing, and like there's that kind of mentorship is what I'm saying. That they don't have, like that doesn't exist anymore where you have that mentor. So you get a talent in, let's say he gets signed and he can do all these moves and he's got his moves set. You see him on NXT and then you see him in the main roster. And then in my opinion, this is just me and I know I'm a freaking dinosaur, but the guy's never gets better physically in the ring. He gets better on the mic because he's getting reps on the mic. Yeah. But the in-ring work is the same. It's exactly the same. It doesn't, whatever your dance steps you do. And that's what I mean. That's, I think, what we're missing is that seasoning.
This guy hates
Who are the guys?
Much. And the reason why, what you said just kind of brought a light bulb as to probably why you hate Jey Uso. So he gets a lot of mic time. And his mic experience over the years has been much better. But as John would say, it's followed up by a super kick or preceded by a super kick. So it's always a super kick about to come and kind of ruin the party. And so that point that you just made actually makes a lot of sense. Like, yeah, they're getting a lot of mic time, but the thing is, that's the disconnect. I feel like they think that, okay, we've done so much work in the power plant or, wherever with the same people. And then we bring them up to WWE NXT and have them work with the same people with the crowd. And then you kind of bring them up to Monday Night Raw and have them work the same people with the bigger crowd. Mm-hmm. I kind of understand that exactly what you mean. Like I say, they're not really getting better in the ring, but their mic skills are just kind of just going through the roof. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what sells people sometimes. Like everybody thinks that The Rock was just good on the mic, but The Rock was good in the ring too. So it's kind of like you can't just be one. I feel like there's a lot of one-dimensional things going on as far as, how the talent is not necessarily developing as they used to. So I can honestly see how that being one-sided like that. I can agree with that.
And that's the role of the carpenter, is to do that, is to be that seasoned. Go ahead, John.
One of the reasons why we wanted to have you on, because you are a carpenter. You are the guy who's in our part of the world is just like, he is so revered. I can't tell you folks, like, but the people he works with, he's just, because he does pass that knowledge on, not just in the ring, but to people like myself, but he does. But Mark, you were a carpenter in the ring in terms of, you did a lot of WWE dark matches back in the day and working at TV tapings.
Yeah.
Tell me about some of the guys who you worked in and who kind of,
I wouldn't say
you really enjoyed working.
I wouldn't say carpenter. I'd say like it was a jobber, right? Because back then you could actually work. So if you got a dark match, so that was before the cameras were just being tested, you got to do some offenses. So we were all just trying to get jobs, is what it was, right? So if you got that dark match, and then they filmed. So I was on. I think my first thing was on Shotgun Saturday Night, I believe, right? So, but then that was a jobber match. So that was just because once you got to that point, you're just getting squashed. But then it got to a point where, let's say, you'd be on Saturday night or what was the next one? Velocity, right? And then there was Sunday Night Heat. So those are the shows they'd film before. And then, so if you got on those, then they would, depending on who your agent was, they'd say like, hey, you know, they got to beat somebody. They can't just beat up a person like a wet mat, like do something, right? So that's where we got creative and kind of, without taking the shine away from anybody that you're working on the main roster, but still being able to look like a threat enough that I could pull one off here. You know what I mean? If what's funny is my nephew sent me something the other day, which I don't even remember the match, but it's me and Bobby Roode against, oh man, see, now I can't remember anybody. Lance Cade, but they called him something different. Garrison Cade, I think they called him.
Garrison Cade, I remember that.
Yeah. Him and his tag partner was one of the Nitro. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. I'll remember it. But anyways, we did this match on Velocity, and so he sent me this, and me and Bobby get like freaking tons of offense. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I don't even remember doing this match. Good Lord. You know, like we did like false tags, and he broke up a pin, and I'm like, what is happening here? You know? But it was an interesting time to be there, and it was Jindrak, Mark Jindrak. Yeah.
Oh.
So it was those two were working as a tag.
Cade and Jindrak.
Mm-hmm.
But who are some of the guys that you enjoyed doing stuff with? I know you had a lot of.
Oh,
there were a couple guys.
Just, you know, great times. Like, so it was about 4-year stretch, and we worked a lot. Like a whole. I say we. There was like the Canadian group was like there was a guy Larry Destiny. I don't know if you remember him, John. But he was like
I do. Yeah, a little.
And then Bobby Roode and myself, and then later and Tyson Dukes. And then later on, Eric Young. And then at the tail end of Eric Young's thing was Cody Deaner. It was his thing, Cody Steele. So he did that thing with Angle, with Kurt Angle. But so we just worked our asses off, man. Went all around Lake Michigan. So it was like, you know, Green Bay to Chicago, and then all the way back up through all the Cincinnati stops and all that stuff, Ohio, into Detroit, and then anywhere in Canada. So to the point where the booker would phone us and say, you're in Canada, right? I go, yep. And I'm like in Ontario. I'm in like butt-fuck Ontario, right? And they go, yeah. Can you go to Halifax? I go, yes. And then I got to get to Halifax. You know, but we did it. We did it, and it was awesome, and just never got a full-time job. Just kind of slid under the radar all the time, but tons of experience. So, you know, my first time ever in the WWE ring was against Sick Boy. Remember him?
Oh my God!
Yeah,
Sick Boy.
yeah. And then I worked a bunch of the OVW guys, and then my first time on TV doing a job was me and Bobby against Perry Saturn and Dean Malenko. So you couldn't be in there with two better guys, man. So good.
Man,
so good.
Perry. I love Perry.
Perry Saturn's one of the most complete pro wrestlers of all time.
I got a spot for Perry. Ask this man about how my love for Perry, because I used to
he loves Perry. Yeah, he's a big Perry Saturn guy.
Perry Saturn was my guy. Look, I caped for Perry Saturn so hard back in the day because I was mad when they switched his gimmick up when he went to WWE and he had the damn mop.
Yeah,
it pissed me off to no end because I was like, that's a fucking good wrestler that y'all ruining. Mm-hmm. Like, I felt so bad about him. I felt worse about him than I did Dean Malenko, and I watched what they did to Dean Malenko, and I was just like, they taking all my favorites. They taking everybody who I loved and watched build up, and they kind of making them just like pawns in a weird game. It was kind of strange, but like I say, Perry Saturn is one of the best wrestlers I've ever witnessed in my life. Like, he made everybody look like everything was so dangerously drastic.
Everything was so crisp. It
was so crisp, and so that Death Valley driver, I knew he broke by 4 or 5 necks, and everybody would get up like, "No, I'm fine, I'm great." Yeah. It was a really good move. He tucks my head perfectly, and like once I started to understand how wrestlers' bodies move, because I'm a big guy and I play football, so I had to understand how body moves a lot. So everything that I seen in the wrestling ring, I would love to want to do, but I would probably kill somebody if I tried. So at the end of the day, it was always just simply like, all right, what are they doing to kind of make the movements go? And then Perry was like one of the ones that I would kind of watch and see, okay, he can sell a punch, he can sell a hit, he can sell a move where he's picking somebody up that's way, heavier than him. Mm-hmm. And he kind of sold it really, really well. And I'm like, that's one of the reasons why I kind of got into it. Like, I wanted to see that guy progress. I wanted to see him become a champion. But I think the way the kind of ranks work and, how the wrestling business is, it's just kind of like everybody has to have a certain spot. And Hulk Hogan was there. So,
yeah, he should have, like...
Go ahead, John.
No, you go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, like, that was how I used to feel about that's like the tail end of, to me, when the wrestling business was the best, because the best got to do it for a living. Okay. Mm-hmm. So even if you go back years, like Saturday Night's Main Event time, whoever was even in the opening match, or whoever was whatever, a plumber or a freaking clown or whatever, they were still the best of where they came from. Okay. So they were the best in Memphis. They were the best from Toronto. They were the best from whatever. They got a job. Now it was up to them to fall into place of where they belong there, but they were still the best. And that's why you never had a shitty match. Everything was great. And they knew how to tell that story. They knew how to wrestle the match where they were slated on the card. So the opening match continuing on to the main event, right? And not taking those other matches, not taking anything away from the main event. So it did build. It built like a movie. So you had a crescendo at the end. So opening match was great, and then there were bookends, right? Opening match was great, main event's great, and then in between, it just had to build in a certain way, and that was where the agents came in, and that's why, like, your garbage men, your cowboys, they were all great in the ring, even though they looked silly in what they were wearing. It didn't matter. Their work was out of this world.
Right, and that's something that they just took the spotlight from back in the day.
Yeah, for sure.
So obviously there's a lot of, like, the bloodline storyline, but it's going on. But you wrestled Jamal and Rosie, right?
Yeah, fantastic. Safe. Just such professionals. Everything felt great, looked devastating. That's usually the stuff that it's safe as hell, is when it looks so terrible.
Right.
It looked devastating. It was done safely and well. So yeah, I had a couple of matches there, and they were probably, like I said, took such good care. I know I did this thing where I did a big crossbody, and then Umaga would run in and catch me and give me the Samoan drop out of midair. And that was one of the things that everybody liked. So then when I saw him again, he's like, that's the guy, let's do it again. Right? So that was cool too. Yeah, so I think that was me and Bobby again. I think we were he's lucky he got away from me. He made a living.
You and Bobby Roode got a little conversation to work out about some compensation.
That's right.
But anyway, we were about that on another
maybe we make a couple of shots. But Mark, let's get to your top five. Who are your top five carpenters?
All right. So
and like, put them in order or whatever you want to do.
Well, I'm going to say this right away. The other thing about pro wrestling to me is that you have to look different than the people buying a ticket. I don't care what it is. If you're in the ring, you can't look like you can get whooped by the kid in the front row. Okay. There's got to be something. You can look like a kid yourself, but you better look crazy or something. Something's got to be different. You might have a fucking, I don't know, one big tooth. I don't know, whatever it is. You got to be different. So one of my favorite guys, it was Tiger Chung Lee. Okay. So not only is this guy a WWF jobber legend, but he was giant, and you never figure out how big this dude was until you see these matches again. And just like, because he was the big Oriental fella. He'd throw like 3 kicks and slap on that nerve hold, right? And so, and it's just like, I love it. I could watch this all day long. It's just freaking poetry in motion, man. So that's my number one, because he's giant. He belongs in the ring. He doesn't belong selling popcorn, right? CV Affy. Do you remember him?
I do.
Grab your phone and look that up right now. And look at this guy. Built like a brick shithouse. SIVIAFI. Check him out. He is monster.
Let's see if I can share a screen. Just give me a second.
Hey, for those who haven't had the opportunity to look this dude up, He looks like The Rock with a mullet, and he's a little bit bigger than The Rock.
Yeah. And he was a jobber. Solid, amazing. The crowd would pop when he come out. Like
he
had
looks
that
like Jimmy
charisma.
Superfly Snooker. Like for
He
real,
does.
for real.
He does. He's probably from that family.
That's probably why they hired him. Hold on,
Like
now
a guy
let me.
like that, and he was on the bottom of the card, right? Look at that guy. He looks like $1 million.
Yeah. See, and this kind of brings a perspective to the wrestling business. Like you say, everybody who is in the business was the best from somewhere. So he could be the best from somewhere totally different and never actually get the shine that he actually deserved to get. Like, this is a perfect example.
Yeah.
And I'm saying like this, if y'all look at dude, this is probably your world heavyweight champion today.
Yeah.
Like, not even bullshitting you. This is probably your world heavyweight champion. This is probably the dude who's coming out right after the match to go ahead and talk some shit. Like, if he had a great promo, I'm digging him up. Like, that's just it.
That's
Like,
right.
look at this dude.
There he is.
Arms. All arms and chest.
Oh, yeah.
He's The Rock with hair.
Yeah.
Like, come on, dude. Like, people don't always have a good idea of what a wrestler is supposed to look like. This guy looks like a wrestler.
Exactly.
Like you say, it's not, if you don't look like the guy who can get beat up by the kid in the front row. Like, he doesn't. He just doesn't.
There you go.
For those who don't know,
How tall is he? Do they have his stats there?
He looks about 6'8".
He's giant.
If I'm just eyeballing, I can't see his kneecaps in the picture. He's at least 6'8".
Look at that thing. It says wrestling jobber. There you go. Oh, well.
He looks like
the
Haku.
legend.
Bring up SD Jones.
Good.
Bring up SD Jones. That was my other guy.
Oh, FT Jones.
Okay, he
He
was
was
part of
huge.
WrestleMania 1, right? He's got a doll. Look at this guy. Right? He's another brick shithouse. Great wrestler, smooth in the
That's
ring.
me if I got in shape.
Hey, there you go.
That's definitely me if I got in shape. I'm gonna tell you, I'm about 6'4", 6'5", you know, just kind of.
You know what? You come up and live with me. Come up and live with me in the cave. I'll feed you. We'll go on a regimen. We'll walk in the bush.
You see, John, look, if I move to Canada, I might be living better than you, John. I'm not saying I got a house. I got
I'll
food,
take
water,
care
and
of you.
sunburn.
I got a dog. I got a giant dog we can play with. It's great.
I love dogs. So
There you
look,
go.
I'm big in Canada. I might be more famous than John now. I might have to come out to John and be like, look, you can come with us. Even though you live here already, you can come with us. I mean,
There's
look at this
FT
guy.
Jones.
Yeah, there you go.
Special Delivery Jones.
Hey,
And what he did at WrestleMania 1 was he jobbed to Bundy.
there you go. But Bundy,
Like,
had to
that's
kill-
what he did.
But
You know what,
but
though?
it's Bundy though.
That guy
Bundy
was
was in the main event, and Bundy was in the main event of WrestleMania 2. So, like, they gave us, like, he was, like you said, he was beating somebody. Like, FT Jones
That's right.
was the son. Get an action figure, for God's sakes. Anyway, next up, Mark.
Pedro, man. Pedro's there. And then now I started looking at guys because I was going to do like an Iron Mike Sharp. I know we talk about Mike Sharp a lot, but just the one guy, like once again, the Carpenters are the people who help lift other people up. Like the next generation gets lifted up. And by the way, I do this in the indies. So when I do get John, when people contact you to contact me to find me in my bunker, I always tell them, like, don't bring me in for one show, bring me in for 3. Because I'll do something with your newest kid and whoever you want to do, and we're going to do something at least 3 or 4 shows in a row, and then I'll put the kid over at the end, right? And that's what I think these guys. Look at this guy. He's the first Triple Crown, correct?
This was in his later years.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
But
Look
see, he
at
could
him.
still offer. He was offering his knowledge to the next generation and making them better as they go up and he goes down. That's what it's all about, you know. And he's the real
Mhm.
deal. It's like Mike Tyson stepping in the ring again, right? He's gonna put he's lifting somebody else up and lifting the sport of boxing up because he's involved. He can just has that you know, he's the real deal. Even though he's not 25 years of age anymore, he's still got that name and that draw that he can pass on to someone else. And then, you know,
So that's
Tito.
Pedro was number.
Yeah,
Tito?
so I got 1, 2, 3, 4. That's my 5 is up to Pedro, but then Tito and Rick Martel I had down as on what they did for Shawn Michaels, and breaking him out as a single star, and make because imagine that you work a year on the road with Rick Martel. Are you kidding me? Good God!
Yeah,
like that's just unheard of.
You don't get to do it no more these days. I think that's the thing. Like all this stuff.
They don't even work the road. They're not working the road anymore.
Like I don't even think it's like that. Like back in the 90s, you could hear stories, and even Kevin Nash and them talking about how they were on the road currently at that time. Mm-hmm. Just driving across the states, just kind of going and going. Like funny enough, where I'm from in Southeast Texas, Mark Henry's like 30 minutes up the road. Mm-hmm. So all the wrestling stories that he used to pass around the city. So everybody kind of knows them. So it's like, he used to have stories about him, driving on the road and riding with people and just kind of working the business. And one day we'll have Mark on this show, and I guarantee we'll have it. And that we'll let everybody know when that show is, of course. So Mark, if you're listening, go ahead and, get ready to go ahead and do this podcast, because of course this is going to be one for the ages. Another Southeast Texas boy talking to another Southeast Texas boy. So we're going to have that banter. But the stories on the road for some wrestlers kind of make them actually a little, like, it kind of provides another perspective on being a wrestler. Like, I remember they was telling stories on, Stone Cold's Broken Skull podcast. And Mark Henry would tell stories about him, The Godfather, The Undertaker, riding across the states and just kind of doing little random pranks on each other and doing stuff like that. Like the camaraderie, it's like a locker room. Like I played football, so the locker room was literally where everything kind of was matriculated. Like if it didn't happen in the locker room, it ain't gonna happen on the field. If y'all are not friends here, y'all ain't gonna be friends there. So it's kind of like that. Like you have to work with who you work with, but also kind of learn and understand everybody's a little bit different in this locker room. Everybody has something to bring to it. So I think with everything kind of going the way it has been, your top 5 list kind of brings a little bit of light to the people who honestly really kind of made the business work. Because honestly, there's not enough people who actually say, all right, if you wasn't on camera, I don't know them and they don't matter. That's not the case at all. Some of these people who didn't make the cameras are some of the best wrestlers that you'll ever see and not see. From what I understand, you're one of the best wrestlers that we'll ever see and not see at the same time. So at the same time, it's like this list actually makes a lot of sense to me. It actually makes me feel really good about having a list like such that we can say on the episode 20 of the top 5, this is a list of wrestlers that you need to look up to see if you really like wrestling or not. Because honestly, these guys give a part to the business that you're not necessarily looking for, but they bring a sense to the business that you're always looking to see. So take some time to look at them.
I got to say, too, like the younger generation right now, and once again, I'm 100 years old. I understand. I don't belong anymore, whatever. But like there's that instant gratification that's needed. So the road work, like why? Why do you do road work? You just get signed, right? You're already a superstar the day you get signed. Some guy who's never taken a bump in his life, but he's a bodybuilder somewhere and he gets seen by somebody and he gets signed to a contract. He's a superstar, right? When you see his name on the internet, he's a WWE superstar.
Exactly.
Bob Schmob, right? It doesn't make, who the hell's that, right? And so I was kind of there at an interesting time because it was there through the early 2000s, so like 90. I think my first dark match was in 98 and then kind of petered off into the 2000s. But it was, I was there when like OVW guys were coming in and you could see where there was workers. So even us job guys would come in and we were treated well. And then as the OVW crews were coming in, then they were like a clique in a way. And then if you weren't part of, so I had a random conversation with one of them, and we were in Ohio somewhere, and they were just like, "So you come from Canada?" And I go, "Yeah." "You drove from Canada to here to wrestle tonight?" I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Why?" Right? Because they have no idea what it takes to be to do this, because you want to do it, and you have to go out and find the wrestling school, join the wrestling school, get into shape, find a mentor, find people to travel with, and then you start hitting cities, bang, bang, bang. But like I said, that's a caveman thing, and I know it probably doesn't work out anymore, but that's how I do. I have to do things that way. I do the hard work, and I that's why sometimes when I talk to people, they look at me like I'm out of left field, and I understand. But like, why isn't that? I just don't understand why these people are in that situation and they don't even see the work that's put into it and the seasoning and just, God damn, if you can entertain 10 drunk people at some random indie show, 10, you can, you know, it's easy to entertain 20,000 people because you can't even get an honest reaction.
On a beach.
Sure.
How about 5 on a beach?
And the ring broke.
Yeah, I heard about 5 on the beach where the ring broke.
Yeah.
Don't hit the ropes is what I was told.
Yeah.
And somebody did it anyway.
Yeah.
But neither here nor there.
I love it because it's like you watch WCW Bash at the Beach 95, which has one of the best promos for it ever. An episode of Baywatch where Ric Flair, Kevin Sullivan, and Vader are trying to take over this gym that's really popular. And they're going to set up a match with like Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan. And Flair says the classic line when they're like, "You can't do it." He's like, "Sweetheart, I got the document." That's Mark's favorite line of the whole thing. I got the document.
The best part about that, do you remember that night on the beach when the ring broke? And I dove out and I grabbed this. So this is a true story, man. I'm sitting there selling. I see that everything's falling into rat shit anyways. And I see the ring bell hammer. I'm like, I'm going to use the ring bell. And I just grabbed it. And I'm chasing this guy around the ring. And he's like, "What is happening? What's going on?" It was great. He had no idea what was going on. We still talk about this to this day. I see him. He's like, "Remember that time you chased me with the hammer?"
But it was like the complete opposite. It was like the complete opposite. They had like 100,000 people. We had like 6. It was about to pour rain. The ring is screwed. It was like, what a night. But like, you know, like again, for me, you go to some of these shows and you know, lucky enough, like we've been able to bring in some of the legends and you hear stories there. And then you hear stories from the guys who've worked the road and then all these events, like just crazy shit happens one or the other. So, but it's like, that's the thing. It's like,
is that the video game of pro wrestling now is taken over. And you talk to a lot of young people and they say stuff like, you know, I say, "Hey, do you play football?" They go, "What do I do to get in the business?" "Play football, learn to box, learn how to wrestle in high school, you know, get hit, like take jujitsu."
You got to take some hits.
And they say, and they go, "Absolutely not, because it's fake and I can do whatever I want." And I was like, okay. And I guess I'm wrong, right? But that's my advice.
Also, you have to understand too with Mark. Sorry. What people have to understand with Mark about when he talks about the traveling and working the road, sorry to interrupt, George, is he lives far away from anything. Like Sudbury, I'm in Collingwood. Sudbury's 3 hours from me. So you're what, about 4.5 from Toronto?
Yeah.
Like he's been known to drive 6 hours and then like drive right back. Like he's a road warrior. He's been doing it like so long.
You might as well move to Texas.
And still does.
You might as well move to Texas. Look, everything about 6-7 hours from each other, so you'll fit right on in. That's here.
Perfect.
You can get your little cave on the west of Texas, and then come back to the east of Texas where almost civilization is. It's actually great.
I will say this about today's wrestling as compared to the old stuff is that we still talk and live in high regard of matches of Hogan and Warrior, Hogan, Savage, Rick Steamboat, okay? Sting, Rick Rude, that's for you, buddy. But I'm telling you right now, I don't think that anything we're seeing today is going to be talked about with reverence. Do you remember that time when somebody super kicked somebody?
I put it to you like this. I'm living in the moment and I watch currently because, of course, we do the show.
Yeah,
I watch currently because one, I love wrestling and I still do love the art of it all. I think the one thing about it is for me that it's changed a little bit to where it's not necessarily, you know, on the fly. It's more soap opera-y, but at the same time, you can still see some of the things. For me, and this is just totally me, I don't know if there's anybody who can actually say there's a good time to kind of see it, but the past, I think where you can kind of say, "Oh, do you remember the time?" Everybody's still trying to remember the Monday Night Wars. Everybody's trying to relive, remake, sell that. Everybody's still making money off of that. Like you say, they won't make that much money off the Yeet movement. They won't make that much money off of what Roman Reigns is doing. Now you'll remember Roman Reigns because he capitalized throughout this entire time as the best wrestler in this particular
You'll
era.
remember some of the top guys, of course.
Yeah, you'll remember some of the top guys. That's easy. But to know somebody like Perry Saturn when they was working, Dean Malenko, Disco Inferno, who was, that guy. I love DDP, Raven, all these guys, Lodi, Sick Boy, everybody who was actually, the Flock, Billy Kidman. Like, I was one of those guys who watched the roster versus watching just the main guys. Mm-hmm. I remember more of the mid-card guys than I do some of the main card guys because the mid-card guys gave better matches. And some of the feuds were a lot better. Like, when Raven had the whole Flock and the feud with the Flock was going on and everything seemed to be just really like everybody had its own storyline. Everything had its own thing. Like there was so many wheels in motion that it was like you couldn't help but watch. Nowadays it's like I'm waiting on Roman to come on. They said Cody's gonna be on about 30 minutes at the beginning, so I'm gonna see that. Like you can almost plan to watch it at a certain time and understand what you're about to get. Mm-hmm. It's not like the old adage wrestling. Like back in the day, and even from what I consider back in the day, it was a feeling. Like your TV had a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. Like I would watch whatever, whether it be Raw, SmackDown, Heat, Velocity, Nitro.
For me, it was Wrestling Challenge. When I heard Gorilla Monsoon's voice, that was it.
Exactly.
That was that. But I wanted to mention two guys. What's that?
I don't really think there's that much stuff that's iconic today. Like there's nothing that kind of for me, it's not nothing that really moves me to be like, I have to. It's going to be for you, it's never going to be like nothing's going to beat Sting Hogan. No, for you. Like that kind of thing. Like that's the era George is kind of really
once again when we spoke earlier, like that's how the show was done, right? So the mid card was more exciting. That's why, and then you had Hogan in the main because he's the biggest dude, right? You know what I mean? Like, and it might have been a little slower, but he could emote and he could pull the feelings out of the crowd. The crowd cared about him. The thing is, though, is that's why with WWE styles of wrestling, which there was a WWE style, these guys would come up. The sheep herders, for goodness sakes, were bleeding all over the place, and then they come to the WWE, become who's it? The Bushwhackers.
Bushwhackers, yeah.
And now instead of bleeding everywhere, they're licking kids' heads and they're selling dolls and they're doing the news and they're doing, and it's just like, but there was a style, right? So you can't do that hardcore style here. So there was a WWE style, which was a way to conserve yourself from what these guys were doing. Look at the Memphis stories, all these crazy matches they were having in Memphis. But then if you got signed from Memphis and you came up and you did the Fed, it was it was scaled back a lot more. It's shoulder tackle, clothesline, blah blah blah, big finish. You didn't have to, and then but WrestleMania, that's when you let it all hang out because you built a storyline for an entire year and people were ready to see it come to fruition that night. That's what it was all about. Yeah. You didn't have these WrestleMania style things free on TV, right? You have to buy the pay-per-view or go and buy a ticket. So it was a really cool thing that they would tease. Hogan Andre was gorgeous. How they, remember Saturday Night's Main Event where they were in Battle Royal, and then you're thinking, oh my God, they're gonna touch, and they just went to back. They turned around, and everybody jumped on them. Like he still didn't. It was a beautiful tease, man. I love it. Like it was just the way I love pro wrestling, and the way I think that pro wrestling can. You got to understand too. Like I always use music analogies, and to me, when you cut an art form or a sport down to the gimmick or the niche, right? Like a niche market, you also shorten who it appeals to, right? So if it's metal, you have hair metal, glam metal, death metal, whatever. There's so many different branches of metal, and each one of those things are to one specific group of people. And then you have Metallica, who appeals to everybody.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And they encompass all that shit. And so that's, I think, is with wrestling is that same way. If you tell that story that everybody can understand, and, you know, like maybe the UFC crowd, do they watch wrestling nowadays? I don't know. Like I know like boxing people used to watch wrestling because they could buy it a little bit. They're saying, oh, okay, I see that, you know.
I would say UFC people kind of watch it, not necessarily fully into it. The only reason they would probably watch it is because the wrestlers who have gone back and forth and tried to kind of experiment, and then all of a sudden they go back to wrestling and they're like, well, let me see what he's doing over there. We get probably a little bit of that crowd. And I'm not saying that it's a lot because, of course, the wrestlers that go over obviously come back to wrestling because it didn't work out in UFC. So you're not looking for them to be great talent over there, but you're trying to see what are they really good at. So we probably get a little bit of that crowd. I'm not going to say that they are, 100% turned off from it, but it's not as physical as UFC. So you can honestly see what people will be like, well, nobody's getting kicked in the face and broken noses and all that. Well, you don't necessarily have to in wrestling. So I don't think that's, the gimmick I'm trying to pull over on you. But
or maybe it's the fact that you're seeing someone the same size as your 14-year-old son on TV right now.
Right. Hey, they're not getting too big no more. No. Tornado, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
You brought up some of my favorite matches without even trying, which that's fine because my favorite wrestler is Sting. I grew up right around there. Like that was my guy. He's still my guy to this day, even though I feel like you can take the paint off at this point. But of all time, I'm pretty sure you have a list of matches that you kind of can go back to and be like, that's the one. What's the one match that you feel like is the one match that embodies wrestling for you?
Oh boy. It's probably Ric Flair, Sting. Yeah.
One of the greatest.
One of the greatest. Was that Wrestle Rock? What was that? Which one was that? The Nashville one.
It was the Clash of the Champions.
Clash of the Champions?
Okay. So good.
Oh, you're talking, or are you talking about Steamboat and Flair?
No, and then I was going to go Steamboat next. Steamboat and Flair too. Like I said, Flair's just that meter. He's that. Some people criticize him, and I think Bret Hart had the same kind of ring presence where he could take anybody. And when Bret Hart was champ, he was doing that with all these guys that were feeding him. So they're giving him these big dudes, and then he's just able to get that match out of them. He can draw that match out of these guys, right? And so they could have these fantastic matches, and because he had a meter about him where he could go longer and stretch that time out, and just fantastic cardio, of course, but just it's the way they work in the ring, and there's a specific beats per minute, man. And I could watch it all day long, and Terry Funk had that too. So I'd say Funk and Hogan, which I already brought up, is one of my favorites, which I think is a Boston Garden as well. Mass Superstar Hogan from Boston Gardens. International wrestling, I'd have to say the Rougeau brothers against they did a really good spot with the Rougeau brothers against Jimmy Garvin and Ronnie Garvin with Precious, and I got to see that spill out in person, which is great. A lot of great wrestling back then. Kurt Hennig, of course. Pretty well everything that dude ever did was fantastic. What I liked about him too, it was that you saw something new, right? Like you saw something new every match. And then I liked that they were able to play with their moveset back then, and you didn't just get that same old, which I like. So like for another funny, like there was always the moveset, right? Because Ric Flair had a moveset, of course, right? He always had those spots. However, it was everything that it was put around. And the reason why those spots were there was because he wrestled everybody. He wrestled everybody in a car lot parking lot or in front of 40,000 people in the Dominican. Like he wrestled everybody. That's why he did that. But he could do that. Nobody could do what he could do. Like him and Terry Funk and Harley Race. They're just road warriors, man. Like just unbelievable. I had something to say, but I fucking lost it. But anyways, I'm telling you, man, it's just I get so excited when I think of Ric Flair wrestling. It's just, to me, that's pro wrestling. Roddy Piper, goddamn Roddy Piper. What am I going to say his name? Roddy Piper's pro wrestling.
This show will actually make you remember and forget some of the greatest. And this is exactly why we do this, because you got to bring them up.
Oh my God. Roddy Piper. Yeah,
I mean,
nobody.
his
I'm not
promos,
Canadian.
There's a promo with him, a promo on Mr. T. Mr. T wasn't there, but he comes out of the shower and Danny DeVito's in it. Do you know what I'm talking about? You ever see that promo?
The war to settle the score.
Yeah.
We'll tweet it. Yeah, we'll tweet it out. It's
And
funny.
he comes out in a towel, and oh my god, he's just magic. Dude's magic. Like,
I'm
and that's
actually watching the Saturday night main event while we're doing the show. By the
Nice.
way, Terry
Oh.
Funk and Hogan in
Oh.
'86.
there you go.
Yeah.
This match, just for the few minutes that I've actually seen it, I think I can understand why y'all love it so much. The crowd gives everything back. And it's no sound. It's like the crowd gives everything back. They're so into this.
Nobody's on. Like, I know there's no cell phones, but nobody's taking their eyes off.
Exactly.
That.
Nobody's taking their eyes off this. Like
Terry-
Jimmy Hart's outside going crazy. Hulk's in the ring just going nuts. Like, no, this is a real show. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go
Terry
back and watch.
Funk-
Sporting event. It's a sporting event. You know,
Yeah,
it's
Terry
presented like a sporting event in many ways.
Yeah.
Just like Evil Knievel was done as a
Yeah.
sporting event, right?
They were like, bro, he's about to ride a motorcycle and
That's right.
jump on some buses or something. Like,
That's right.
you know?
But there's pomp and ceremony. But guess what? I remember seeing him for the first time on like Saturday sports show on ABC, whatever it was called at the time. You know, that's where I
That's
saw it.
insane.
Yeah. Terry Funk, there's a great match. I love it. It's from the first ever WWE pay-per-view. What was it called? Shit. Anyway, it was a tournament, and Terry Funk wrestled Moondog Spot,
Mm.
and they did. I forget. Oh, the Wrestling Classic. It's called. You'll find it on the network. It's awesome. Terry Funk did a spot, and they were doing this thing where neither one wanted to. He's like, "You don't want to wrestle. No, I don't really want to wrestle you." And then they kind of got in a skirmish on the outside, and like Terry Funk like puts Moondog Spot in, and Funk loses by count out in like 10 seconds. And and he like went insane, and the crowd. It was like 10 seconds. It was such a nuanced finish, but everybody got it.
Mhm.
But it was just like, man, like, why would you do that? And then, of course, he went on to work with Hogan.
Well, look at the count out finishes back then. You'd have count out finishes. You'd have DQs on every card.
Yeah.
There was always a count out or a DQ.
Yeah. So,
You know,
but, like, these are the guys, like, the timing belt thing, I think, is such, that's the perfect metaphor, I think, for Ric Flair and Terry Funk, because they were, the guys who, like, and when they were together, it was magic.
Yeah.
Like, any match they had was fantastic. Like, just because Funk threw that great fucking punch and just could sell and was nuts. And Flair would, like, chop him all day long. And just, like, it was like pro wrestling at its finest when they got in there. But,
the Freebirds, and especially a guy like Terry Gordy, the smoothness he brought to his movement in the ring. What's his name there from the Midnight Express?
Bobby
Eaton. Just smooth. Like that's a thing of beauty watching that fella wrestle. He looked like hell, right? But goddamn was he smooth. Jerry Lawler, another guy, like small, out of shape, but he could tell a story and people believed it, and everything looked legit. That right hand looked legit,
that punch.
and that pile driver looked legit, man. And that's
and
what it was all
just
about.
pulled the strap back.
Yeah, man.
And he, like, and people forget, like, he drew so much money.
Yeah.
Every single week in Memphis, just money after money after money for years, and worked guys who had never been in the business before, like in main events, because he was just so good. Like, Lawler never, I don't think, gets the credit for, like, he's got to be one of those guys who's like,
Yeah.
because he could do everything. Like, he was like, if Bobby Heenan had to wrestle more, he'd be like Jerry. He and Jerry Lawler would kind of be similar. Bobby Heenan only wrestled when it meant something. But, like,
and that's what it's all about. Luckily, YouTube helps a lot, where you can go down a rabbit hole and find out a name. Like, I'm going to throw out a name like Buzz Sawyer, and then go watch some Buzz Sawyer matches. and you're going to see some crazy
Yeah.
bumps, and you're going to see some stuff that made a lot of sense. You see a guy who never made it, right? However, back then, though, you can make a living on the indies, right? It was a different world. So your indie was drawing so your indie was drawing 5,000 people a night. So it was a different story than today. But go down a Rick Rude rabbit hole and just watch all these amazing matches he had with everybody. How good he was, man. Yeah. Unbelievable. Hercules Hernandez, Don Morocco.
I'm actually watching Don Morocco and Cowboy Bob Orton right
there
now.
You go. Bob Orton's another one.
Bob Orton,
silk in the ring. But oh my God,
Larry Zbyszko.
Yep. What's his name? Talking about smooth. Barry Windham. Smooth as silk.
Yeah.
Barry was a very, very good class act.
Did you guys pick some carpenters?
Well, I got a couple guys I have. Buddy Landell.
Oh,
he's always a guy Buddy Landell. He was just like you talk about smooth in the ring, and like wasn't in shape. And the best story I love about Buddy Landell is that he was supposed to work with Ric Flair, the Battle of the Nature Boys, and he fucking fell asleep and like woke up late and missed the TV tape.
There you go, the good stuff.
But in the ring, like he didn't have a great body. He was like he was like just so good, so really good. And another guy, Mark, that I know you'll pop for is Hollywood John Tatum, a guy people probably have never heard of, but he worked in like the UWF in the 80s, mid world class. Like he never really was on WCW TV, but he was like just really, really good. You could just like really good in the ring. I remember you had never heard of him before. You're like, what?
And then I went down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, like so. There's
Pat Tanaka. Pat Tanaka was awesome.
Pat Tanaka, yes.
Pat Tanaka is a freaking amazing professional wrestler, right? And once again, a smaller guy, but he brings something different to make him look like he belongs in that ring. Kabuki,
Kabuki.
Kamala. Oh my God, Kamala. Are you kidding me?
Kamala, JYD.
Oh yeah.
JYD wasn't necessarily great in the ring, but he was money.
Yeah, he was a nice popular
money on the money. But well, Mark, we thank you very much for joining us.
Hey,
it's been a great time. We appreciate your time, but it's like getting late, so we should probably hit it. You got to get back to the bush.
It's 11:15 here, so I'm gonna be. I'll go. I'm gonna work out first. I'm gonna go run in the dark in the bush, naked.
But Mark, we thank you very much for joining us.
That was that one bit. It always goes a little bit too far. It's only one bit, but hey, I got it. You live by yourself, so I would do it too. I would do it too.
Right on, fellas.
Mark, thanks for joining us. No problem. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. George, I guess we'll wrap it up. Yeah.
Always like, share, subscribe. Let us know what you got. Give us your top 5 carpenters if you have any on the page. We definitely want to see what you guys got. Top 5 wrestlers that we don't even know that you know. Let's go with that. If you've got 5 wrestlers that you can bring to our attention that we haven't, and I'm pretty sure that it's not very many that y'all can find that we haven't spoken about. But at the same time, there's always a few. So go ahead and give us our list. See what your top 5 is of the week. Tornado will probably never answer your questions or answer your tweets because he probably won't get them. But at the same time, if you have messages for this man, you can get in contact with us. I'm basically going to move in with him next summer.
That's right.
Y'all don't even know it. But at the same time, we definitely want to make sure that y'all come back next week and see the show again. We definitely want to have Tornado back eventually. I'm pretty sure John will probably get in your ear. I know you want to do the show. It's okay. You can come along. And look, we have a spot just for you. The chair's still going to be warm. But at the same time, I want everybody to kind of like, share, subscribe, come along the way. This is us, the 5 Count. We're coming at you this week on a live Tuesday, late at night, as always. Next week when we get on, I don't know what we'll have for you. This is a surprise.
I don't know what we're going to talk about.
We don't
Yeah,
know what we have
we'll
to do just yet, but
we
we'll
don't
put
even
something
know.
together for you guys. So I'll put a poll out
Yeah.
coming up in a couple days, and we'll kind of go ahead and get some ideas from you guys. But at the same time, like I say, same time next week. Come see us. Top 5.